again, right? You have let's talk physical soil, right? Sand, silt, clay, and organic matter. What is sand? Well, there's actually a lot of different types of sand. There's black sand beaches, which are basically iron. Like if you go out there with a magnet, it just sucks up. We've all had that game where you paint the mustache on the guy with the black sand. There's calcitic sand. Calcitic sand is probably the most abundant on the planet because essentially that was coral that had gone through a growth phase. Remember, there's been heating and cooling of this planet a number of times. How many extinctions we've had? 5, where everything got wiped off the planet. I think the most interesting extinction is when I believe it was a polar shift, although we'll never know. But the ice from both poles actually met at the equator, suffocated everything, right? Frozen fucking world, and yet here we are talking. Yeah. Right? There should have been no life left. No life. But yet here we're talking, living in a Garden of Eden, or it was a Garden of Eden, 300 years ago. We've, set it back a bit. But bottom line is that there will never be so much plants that create so much silt before that silt doesn't pocket or distribute or get consumed by biology.
Okay. So how long does it take for organic matter to become silt?
Depends on the density of the organic matter. So you have cellulose and you have lignin. They're very, very hard to break down. So look at a redwood tree, right? It falls over up in the redwoods up north in Humboldt. Those logs are there for hundreds of years, if not longer. So that tree is going to take a hell of a long time to turn to silt. Now, that brown leaf that came off your maple tree that fell in the river, that's now being consumed by decomposing bacteria and saprophytic fungi, might only be a month, 2, 5 before it becomes silt. And again,
that's kind of what I always figured, that like at the bottom of creeks and stuff like that, you find a lot of silt. It must be that organic matter turning into silt fairly quickly.
Yep. And so listen to this. The floodplains. So I love nature, man. It's so big. It's so beautiful. We have snow in the mountains. The snow melts. It comes down a river that's very steep and it's bouncing rocks off each other and mineralizing itself. And then finally it comes off that mountain into a waterfall, and then it moves through a field we call a floodplain, right? And it turns dark chocolate. And then because it's spring, that dark chocolate water washes up on the shore onto the floodplain. And then the water slowly recedes after dumping all of that silt on that floodplain, which is extremely fertile, right? That's where farmers grow in pretty much everywhere in the world. We've always gone to the floodplains because you get free fucking nutrients every spring.
Mm-hmm. I guess a very famous example would be the Nile.
The Nile.
What I was going to say. Yeah,
listen to this
and them directing it.
Listen to this one, the Nile. One of the most fertile breadbaskets on the planet. A few years ago, and again, don't quote me on the time, but do your research, fact check my ass. They were struggling because the fertility in the floodplains had gone down and they didn't know why. So the Egyptian government hired all these scientists, come in, test our soil. What's going on? We used to get this amount of crop. We didn't do anything to it. And now all of a sudden that yield is going down and down and down. What is this? Come to find out that a government north of Egypt's territory had built a giant hydropower dam. What that power dam had done was settle out the turbidity so that all the fine particles that were suspended in that water settled out. And what the floodplains were missing was nanoclay. So we've all seen it. We just don't recognize it. All right. Nanoclay is such a fine, tiny little platelet that it stays suspended in water for days, if not weeks, before it finally settles out. I call it aquatic snow. That's a better way to put it. And I've seen aquatic snow in a bunch of different forms, whether it be silt or clay or variations of the both of them. So now they're like, oh, fuck, we don't get any more of this nano clay, which is so easy for the bacteria to break down and release all of those minerals. Because remember, clay is rock. That's what it comes from. Clay is rock. Silt is organic matter. Sand can be broken down rock or broken up coral or broken up shells, seashells of any kind, mollusks. So these things come from various forms, but traditional soil science teaches based on dogma we learned in the 1850s, and they've never changed it. They have never modernized that. It's the same fucking religion. It's the same as Christianity. Once they got control, they're fucking going to hold as much control over it as they possibly can. Because again, they're backed by the chemistry companies. The chemistry companies finance soil science. So of course they don't want us to know about biology, because we wouldn't fucking use their poison anymore. Right? So that's why soil science dogma has never changed, because the chemistry companies don't want it to.